The whispers slithered through the mercantile like rattlesnakes, coiling around Rosalie Moretti as she reached for a tin of baking powder on the top shelf without needing a stepladder. At 6 feet tall, she'd grown accustomed to the stares, the tittering laughs, and the unkind remarks that seemed to follow her through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878. "Lord Almighty, she's tall as a cottonwood," Mrs. Peterson's stage whispered to Mrs. Daniels. "No wonder she ain't married yet. What man wants to look up to his wife?" Rosalie's cheeks burned as she clutched her purchases to her chest. 22 years old and already considered a spinster by most folks in town, not because she lacked beauty with her thick chestnut hair and amber eyes. She was striking, but because she stood taller than every eligible bachelor in the county. "5 cents for the baking powder, Miss Moretti," Mr. Holcomb said, eyes fixed somewhere around her collarbone, never meeting her gaze. As Rosalie counted out her coins, the bell above the door jangled. The mercantile fell into a hush as Isaac Keller stepped inside, removing his worn leather hat. The summer sun had darkened his skin to a deep bronze, making his ice-blue eyes stand out like water in the desert. At 6'3", the rancher was one of the few men who could look Rosalie level in the eye. Dust from the cattle drive still clung to his clothes, and his dark hair needed a trim, but there was something in the way he carried himself, confident yet gentle, that had always caught her attention from afar. "Afternoon, ladies," he nodded to the gossiping women who suddenly found their shopping terribly interesting. "Mr. Holcomb." "Isaac, good to see you back. Successful drive?" Holcomb asked, happily ignoring Rosalie now that the town's most eligible bachelor had arrived. "Can't complain. Got fair prices in Cheyenne." Isaac's deep voice filled the small space as he moved to the counter, stopping beside Rosalie. She shifted awkwardly, aware of how they must look standing side by side like a matched pair in height, an oddity in Silver Creek. The thought made her want to hunch her shoulders, but years of her Italian immigrant mother's insistence on proper posture prevented it. "Miss Moretti," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Mr. Keller," she replied softly, gathering her purchases. "Excuse me." As she turned to leave, her elbow caught a display of tinned peaches, sending them clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening in the quiet store, and laughter erupted from Mrs. Peterson and her friends. "Graceful as a newborn colt," one woman snickered. "Poor thing probably can't even see her own feet." Mortified, Rosalie knelt to gather the tins, her long skirts pooling around her. Before she could reach for the second tin, a weathered hand appeared beside hers. "Let me help you, Miss Moretti," Isaac said quietly, his voice for her ears alone as he crouched beside her. "You don't have to. I know I don't." Something in his eyes silenced her protests. Together they restored the display, and when they stood, the difference in their heights was negligible, perhaps an inch, no more. Mrs. Peterson's group had fallen silent, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. "How's your father's orchard coming along?" Isaac asked, as if they were alone and not the center of attention. "I heard the late frost didn't do too much damage." Surprised by his knowledge of her family's business, Rosalie nodded. "The apple trees are flowering well. Papa thinks it'll be a good harvest this year." "Glad to hear it." "Your father's apples make the best pies in the territory." A small, genuine smile tugged at her lips. "Mama would agree with you there." The bell jangled again as the door opened, and a group of cowhands from the Circle B ranch entered, their spurs clinking against the wooden floor. Their foreman, a squat man named Tucker, spotted Rosalie and nudged his companion. "Look, boys, there's the Moretti giantess. Bet she could wrestle a steer better than Johnson here." Fresh laughter rippled through the store. Rosalie felt her face flush anew as she moved toward the door, keeping her eyes on the rough-hewn floorboards. "Actually, Tucker," Isaac's voice cut through the laughter like a knife, "I've been thinking of hiring some help at the running K for the harvest season. Johnson, you interested? I hear you're good with horses." The distraction worked. As the cowboys engaged with Isaac, Rosalie slipped out the door into the afternoon sunlight, exhaling deeply once she was free of the stifling atmosphere inside. She'd made it halfway down the boardwalk when she heard boots behind her. "Miss Moretti, wait a moment, please." Rosalie turned to find Isaac Keller striding toward her, his long legs closing the distance between them quickly. She steeled herself, wondering what he could possibly want. He stopped before her, hat in hand. Up close, she could see the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow and the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. At 32, he was a decade her senior, but the years had been kind to him. "I wanted to apologize for what happened in there," he said. "You have nothing to apologize for, Mr. Keller. People shouldn't speak that way. It's unkind." Rosalie's shoulders stiffened. "I don't need your pity. It's not pity, Miss Moretti." His gaze was steady, just common decency. Before she could respond, he stepped closer. The boardwalk was empty save for them, the town's attention diverted by the arrival of the mail coach down the street. In one fluid motion, Isaac Keller raised himself slightly on his toes and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. It happened so quickly that Rosalie barely had time to register the warmth of his lips against her skin before he stepped back. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at him, speechless. "Have a good day, Miss Moretti." He settled his hat back on his head, tipped the brim, and walked away, leaving her standing there with her fingertips pressed to the spot where his lips had touched. That night, Rosalie couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom she'd had since childhood, listening to the cicadas sing outside her window. The small house at the edge of her father's apple orchard had always been her sanctuary, but tonight it felt confining. The kiss on her forehead had been nothing a gesture of kindness, perhaps even one of pity despite his words to the contrary. Yet she couldn't stop thinking about him. Isaac Keller, with his quiet strength and those eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. "Rosie, are you awake?" Her mother's accented voice called softly from the doorway. "Yes, Mama." Sophia Moretti entered, her silver-streaked dark hair hanging in a single braid over her shoulder. At 50, she still possessed the beauty that had captivated Rosalie's father when they'd met in New York before moving west. "I saw you were quiet at dinner. Is something troubling you?" Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her weight creating a familiar dip in the mattress. Rosalie considered deflecting but found she couldn't. "Isaac Keller kissed my forehead today." Her mother's eyebrows rose. "The rancher, this is unexpected news." "It wasn't like that, it was. I don't know what it was." Rosalie sat up, hugging her knees to her chest. "Some women at the mercantile were laughing about my height again. He stood up for me, and then afterward he just kissed my forehead and left." Sophia's expression softened. "And this troubles you? Doesn't it seem strange to you, a man like him showing kindness to someone like me?" "Someone like you?" Sophia reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "My beautiful Rosalie, who helps her papa tend the orchard, who reads poetry under the apple trees, who can bake bread that would make angels weep. That's someone." "Mama," Rosalie protested weakly, "you know what I mean. I'm different, too tall, too awkward. The only time men look at me is to laugh." "Isaac Keller does not strike me as the laughing type," Sophia said thoughtfully. "He is a serious man from what your papa says, hardworking, respectful. And he could have any woman in the territory. Why would he look twice at me?" Sophia took her daughter's hands. Perhaps because when he looks at you, he sees what I see, not just a tall young woman, but one with a heart to match her height. Strong, steadfast, reaching for the sky. Tears pricked at Rosalie's eyes. You have to say that. You're my mother. I say it because it is true. Sophia rose, patting Rosalie's hand. Sleep now. And remember, the right man will not care if he has to climb a mountain to kiss you. He will be grateful for the view when he arrives. With that pearl of wisdom, Sophia left, closing the door softly behind her. The next morning dawned clear and warm, a perfect day for working in the orchard. Rosalie, dressed in her work clothes, a simple blouse and sturdy skirt that wouldn't catch on branches, and headed out to help her father with the trees. Marco Morty, at 60, still moved with the vigor of a much younger man as he pruned the lower branches of an apple tree. His weathered face broke into a smile when he saw his daughter. Ah, Rosie, just in time. The Granny Smiths need checking. I think they may have some beetles. They worked side by side through the morning, the familiar routine soothing Rosalie's troubled thoughts. Her father had never once made her feel self-conscious about her height. In fact, he often said it was an advantage, as she could reach the highest branches without a ladder. As the sun climbed higher, the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention to the road that ran alongside the orchard. Rosalie's heart skipped a beat when she recognized the rider Isaac Keller, astride his chestnut gelding. He reined in at the fence line, raising a hand in greeting. "Morning, Mr. Morty, Miss Morty." Marco waved back enthusiastically. "Isaac, come in, come in. We were about to take a break." Rosalie shot her father a look of betrayal, but he was already moving toward the gate to welcome their visitor. She had no choice but to follow, brushing dirt from her hands onto her apron. Isaac dismounted with easy grace, tethering his horse to a fence post before stepping through the gate. Up close, in the bright morning light, Rosalie could see he'd shaved and changed into a clean shirt since yesterday. The thought that he might have done so before riding over sent a flutter through her stomach. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Rosalie's before returning to her father. "Not at all. Any excuse for shade and water is welcome." Marco clapped him on the shoulder. "Come, Sophia has made lemonade." As they walked toward the house, Marco engaged Isaac in conversation about cattle prices and the coming harvest, leaving Rosalie to trail behind, acutely aware of how different Isaac looked in their small orchard. His broad shoulders and tall frame seemed to belong in wide open spaces, not among the neat rows of apple trees her father had planted 2 decades ago. Sophia welcomed them onto the porch, her shrewd eyes taking in the unexpected guest with interest. She served lemonade in their best glasses, and Rosalie noticed her mother had somehow found time to put out a plate of her butter cookies as well. "What brings you to our orchard today, Mr. Keller?" Sophia asked, settling into a chair beside Marco. Isaac set down his glass. "Actually, I came to speak with Miss Morty if she has a moment." 3 pairs of eyes turned to Rosalie, who nearly choked on her lemonade. "Me," she managed once she'd recovered. "Yes, madam." He stood, gesturing toward the orchard. "Might we walk a bit?" Marco opened his mouth, likely to give permission, but Sophia laid a hand on his arm. "That is for Rosalie to decide," she said firmly. Rosalie hesitated, then nodded. "I suppose a short walk would be fine." They left her parents on the porch and walked back into the orchard, maintaining a respectable distance between them. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground with patterns of light and shadow. For several moments, neither spoke. "Your orchard is thriving," Isaac finally said. "Your father must be proud." "It's his life's work," Rosalie agreed. "He started with just 10 trees when they settled here after leaving New York. Now we have over 200. "And you help him tend them all?" "I do." I enjoy it being outdoors, watching things grow." She glanced at him curiously. "But I don't think you came all this way to discuss apple trees, Mr. Keller." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, I suppose I didn't." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "I wanted to apologize if I overstepped yesterday. It wasn't my intention to embarrass you." "You didn't," Rosalie said quickly, then more softly added, "It was unexpected, that's all. I should have asked permission to kiss my forehead." A small laugh escaped her. "I don't think that's customary, even in polite society." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Perhaps not. Still, I wouldn't want you to think I take liberties with ladies' foreheads as a regular practice." The absurdity of the conversation lightened something in Rosalie's chest. "I would never presume such a thing about your character, Mr. Keller." "Isaac," he corrected. "Please." "Isaac," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her tongue. "Why did you do it?" "Really?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the orchard as if gathering his thoughts. "I've noticed you for some time, Miss Moretti." "Rosalie," she offered. "Rosalie," he nodded. "I've noticed how people treat you, how they talk. It's not right." "Because I'm tall," she stated flatly. "Because you're different," he corrected. "And in my experience, people fear what's different. They mock what they don't understand." His gaze returned to her face. "I know something about being the odd one out." Rosalie couldn't help the skeptical look that crossed her face. "You, the successful rancher everyone respects. Now, perhaps. But when I first came to Wyoming Territory in '65, fresh from the war, I was just a skinny veteran with nightmares and a bad leg." He tapped his right knee. "Took a mini-A ball at Gettysburg. Healed well enough to ride and work, but not without pain. Folks weren't sure what to make of me, too damaged for some tastes, too quiet for others." Rosalie had never heard this part of his story, though everyone knew he'd fought for the Union. She tried to imagine him younger, wounded, struggling to find his place just as she often felt she was. "What changed?" "Time. Hard work. Finding my own way instead of trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be." He smiled slightly. "And meeting people who saw me, not just my scars or my silences." They began walking again, side by side through the rows of trees. Rosalie was acutely aware of their matching strides, how neither had to adjust their pace for the other. "Is that why you kissed my forehead? Because you understand what it's like to be different?" Isaac stopped again, turning to face her fully. "Partly, but mostly because I wanted to." "Because you deserve kindness, Rosalie. And because," he paused, his confidence seeming to waver for the first time, "because I find myself thinking about you more often than is probably proper." Rosalie's breath caught in her throat. "You do?" "I do." His admission hung in the air between them. "And I came here today to ask if you might consider allowing me to call on you, properly with your parents' permission." 1,000 thoughts raced through Rosalie's mind. Isaac Keller wanted to court her. It seemed impossible, yet the earnest look in his eyes told her he was sincere. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Instead of answering immediately, Isaac reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment against her cheek. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who stands tall in every way that matters. And I'd like the chance to get to know that person better, if she's willing." Rosalie felt warmth spread through her chest, a sensation so unfamiliar that it took her a moment to recognize it as hope. "I think she might be," she said softly. His smile then was like sunrise breaking over the mountain, slow, gradual, but transforming everything it touched. "Then I'll speak with your father before I leave." They walked back toward the house in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts but somehow closer than before. As they approached the porch, where her parents pretended not to be watching, Rosalie found herself wondering if perhaps, Just perhaps, she had found someone who saw her height not as something to mock, but as part of what made her uniquely herself. In the weeks that followed, Isaac called on Rosalie with clockwork regularity. Every Sunday after church, he would appear at the Moretti home, hat in hand, sometimes bearing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, once even a jar of honey from his own hives. They would walk in the orchard or sit on the porch under Sophia's watchful eye, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Rosalie learned that Isaac had come west from Pennsylvania, that he'd built the running K from nearly nothing after the war, and that he preferred the company of horses to most people. "They don't judge," he explained one warm afternoon as they sat beneath an apple tree, a respectable distance between them on the blanket Sophia had insisted they bring. "A horse doesn't care if you're tall or short, quiet or talkative. They only care how you treat them." "Is that why you've never married?" Rosalie asked, then immediately flushed at her boldness. "I'm sorry, that was too personal. No, it's a fair question." Isaac stretched his long legs out before him, leaning back against the tree trunk. "Truth is, I was engaged once, right after the war. Elizabeth Winters, daughter of my father's business partner back east." Rosalie felt an unexpected pang of jealousy. "What happened?" "She visited me after I'd settled here. Took one look at the half-built cabin, the endless prairie, and the work it would take to make a life here." His smile held no bitterness, only acceptance. 2 days later, she handed back my ring and took the next stagecoach east, said she couldn't imagine spending her life so far from civilization. "I'm sorry," Rosalie said softly. Isaac shrugged. "Don't be. She was right, this life isn't for everyone. Better to know before vows are exchanged than after." He glanced at her. "What about you?" "No suitors before me." Rosalie laughed, the sound tinged with old hurt. "Hardly. The boys in Silver Creek have been making jokes about my height since I was 13. Hard to court someone when you're too busy laughing at them." "Their loss," Isaac said simply. As summer ripened into early autumn, their courtship deepened. Isaac invited Rosalie and her parents to the Running K for Sunday dinner, where she met his foreman, Miguel Santos, and his wife Lucia, who kept house for Isaac. The ranch was impressive, 3,000 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals. It spoke of Isaac's hard work and good management. After dinner, while Marco discussed cattle with Miguel and Sofia helped Lucia in the kitchen, Isaac took Rosalie on a tour of the property. They ended at a hilltop overlooking the valley, where the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber. "It's beautiful," Rosalie breathed, taking in the vista. "I thought you might like it." Isaac stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch. I come here to think, to make decisions. Important decisions, sometimes." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Rosalie, there's something I need to tell you," her heart stuttered. Had he tired of her, found their differences too great after all? "What is it?" "I've been offered a contract to supply beef to the military fort in Laramie. It would mean expanding the herd, hiring more hands." He took a deep breath. It would secure the ranch's future, make it the kind of legacy a man could pass down to his children someday. Relief flooded through her. "Isaac, that's wonderful news. You think so?" His eyes searched hers. "It would mean more work, more responsibility." "I think you're more than capable," she smiled. "Is that what you brought me up here to tell me?" "Partly." He shifted, suddenly looking uncertain. "I also wanted to ask, that is, I've been thinking." Rosalie had never seen him struggle for words before. She waited, heart pounding. "Rosalie Moretti," he finally said, "these past months getting to know you have been the happiest of my life." You're kind and smart and stronger than you know. When I'm with you, I feel like I've found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I know it hasn't been long, and if you think we should wait, I'll respect that. But I don't need more time to know what I want." His voice grew steadier as he continued. "I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. I want to see you walking these hills, sitting on the porch of that house, planting apple trees if you like. I want to wake up beside you every morning and thank God for bringing you into my life." Tears blurred Rosalie's vision as she realized what he was saying. "I love you, Rosalie. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. All the doubts and insecurities that had plagued her rose up. Was this real? Could a man like Isaac truly want her, not despite her differences but because of them? Then she looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and love reflected back at her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Isaac, I'll marry you." His face broke into a smile so radiant it rivaled the setting sun. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, framed her face with his hands, and kissed her not on the forehead this time, but on the lips, a kiss full of promise and passion and future. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I should speak to your father," Rosalie laughed, joy bubbling up from deep inside her. "I think he might suspect your intentions already. Even so, I want to do this right." He kissed her again, quickly. "You deserve nothing less." As they walked hand in hand back to the house, Rosalie felt as if her feet barely touched the ground. For the first time in her life, her height didn't matter, or rather, it mattered in all the right ways, making her exactly the right size to fit perfectly against Isaac's side as they made their way home. The news of their engagement spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. By Tuesday morning, everyone from the blacksmith to the schoolteacher knew that Isaac Keller, owner of the Running K, was to marry Rosalie Moretti, the orchardist's tall daughter. Reactions were mixed. Some, like the Reverend Phillips and his wife, offered genuine congratulations. Others, particularly those who had once mocked Rosalie, suddenly found reasons to be especially friendly, inviting her to tea or stopping her on the street to admire her ring, a simple but elegant ruby set in gold that had belonged to Isaac's mother. "Isn't it amazing how a wealthy fiancé improves one's social standing?" Rosalie remarked dryly to her mother after Mrs. Peterson had cornered them outside the church to effusively praise the match. "People are fickle," Sophia agreed, adjusting her shawl. "But do not let bitterness take root, my Rosie. Their opinions matter not at all to your happiness." The wedding was set for October, when the apple harvest would be complete and before winter settled over the territory. There was much to do: a dress to sew, plans to make, a household to prepare. Isaac insisted that Rosalie make whatever changes she wanted to the main house at the Running K. "It's been a bachelor's home too long," he told her as they walked through the sturdy two-story structure on one of her visits. "It needs a woman's touch." Rosalie ran her hand over the mantelpiece in the parlor, imagining Christmas stockings hanging there, children's laughter filling the currently quiet rooms. "It's a good home, Isaac. It just needs some curtains, perhaps, and a few more comfortable chairs." He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, a liberty Sophia allowed now that they were engaged, though she still insisted on chaperoning their visits. "Whatever you want," he murmured against her hair. "It will be your home too, soon enough." Not everyone was pleased by their engagement, however. Tucker, the Circle B foreman who had mocked Rosalie in the Mercantile, seemed particularly put out by the news. He took to making snide remarks whenever he encountered either of them in town. "Heard Keller's building a special door in his house," he told his cronies loudly as Rosalie passed the saloon one afternoon. Extra tall, so his giantess won't have to duck to get inside. Isaac, who had been fetching supplies nearby, heard the comment and strode over, his expression thunderous. "You have something to say about my fiancé, Tucker, you say it to my face." The shorter man squared up, alcohol giving him false courage. "Just making conversation, Keller, no harm meant. Apologize to Miss Moretti." Isaac's voice was low, dangerous. "For what?" "Stating facts." "Everyone knows she's—" Isaac's hand shot out, gripping Tucker's shirt front. "Apologize, now." Rosalie stepped forward, laying a gentle hand on Isaac's arm. "Isaac, please, he's not worth it." For a tense moment, it seemed Isaac might not listen. Then, with visible effort, he released Tucker, who stumbled back. "You're right," Isaac said to Rosalie, though his eyes remained fixed on Tucker. "He's not worth it. Let's go." As they walked away, Tucker called after them, "That's right, Keller, let your woman fight your battles for you." Isaac's shoulders tensed, but he kept walking, his hand at the small of Rosalie's back guiding her forward. "I'm sorry about that," he said once they were out of earshot. "It's not your fault. I wanted to break his jaw. I know." Rosalie smiled slightly. "I appreciate the restraint." "Only for you," he sighed. "I just hate hearing anyone speak of you that way. I've heard worse, believe me. That doesn't make it right." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You know that, don't you? That none of what they say is true or fair or right." Rosalie's heart swelled at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "I know. And knowing you really see me makes their words matter less every day." His expression softened. "Good, because all I see when I look at you is the woman I love. The most beautiful woman in Wyoming Territory, as far as I'm concerned." Despite Tucker's provocations, the weeks leading up to the wedding passed relatively peacefully. Rosalie divided her time between helping with the apple harvest and preparing for her new life as Mrs. Isaac Keller. Sophia and Lucia Santos worked together on her wedding dress, ivory silk, ordered special from Denver, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned Sophia's own wedding gown in Italy. 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. A fire broke out in one of the running Caticus hay barns, spreading quickly in the dry autumn air. Isaac and his men fought the blaze through the night, managing to save the livestock and the main house, but the barn was destroyed, along with the winter feed stored inside. When word reached the Moretti orchard, Rosalie insisted on going immediately to help. She arrived to find exhausted men still dousing hot spots, the charred skeleton of the barn smoking against the morning sky, and Isaac, face blackened with soot, directing the cleanup efforts. He spotted her and came over, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "Rosalie, you shouldn't have come." "Of course I came. Are you hurt?" "Just tired. We lost the barn and all the hay inside, but everyone's safe. That's what matters." Rosalie took in the devastation. "What will you do about feed for the winter?" "I'll have to buy some if I can find any for sale this late. Maybe reduce the herd size." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of ash. "It's a setback, but we'll manage." "Of course you will." She touched his arm. "What can I do to help?" Isaac looked like he might protest, then seemed to think better of it. "Could you help Lucia? She's been making food for the men, and I'm sure she could use an extra pair of hands." Rosalie spent the day in the kitchen, preparing meals for the exhausted ranch hands while Isaac and Miguel assessed the damage and made plans for rebuilding. When she finally left that evening, Isaac walked her to her father's wagon. "Thank you for coming today," he said, taking her hands in his. "It meant a lot to have you here." "Where else would I be when you needed help?" She squeezed his fingers. "That's what marriage is, isn't it? Standing together through good times and bad." A tired smile crossed his face. "Yes, it is." He hesitated. "Rosalie, about the wedding." Her heart sank. "You want to postpone it?" "No. he said firmly. Absolutely not. But things will be tight for a while. Rebuilding the barn, replacing the hay, it's going to take most of our savings. I'd understand if you wanted to wait for better circumstances. Isaac Keller, Rosalie said, drawing herself up to her full height. If you think I'm marrying you for your money or your fine house or anything other than the man you are, then you don't know me at all. Relief washed over his features. I know. I just wanted to be sure you understood what you're getting into. It won't be easy. Life rarely is. She reached up to wipe a smudge of soot from his cheek. But we'll face it together. In the aftermath of the fire, the community of Silver Creek showed its better nature. Neighboring ranchers contributed hay for the running Katakes winter stores. The mercantile extended credit for rebuilding supplies. Even Tucker and his men from the Circle B showed up one day to help raise the frame of the new barn. Don't read too much into it, Tucker told Isaac gruffly. Just being neighborly. But both men knew it was more than that. It was an olive branch, a recognition that out on the frontier, old grievances sometimes needed to be set aside for the good of all. The wedding took place as planned on a crisp October day, with golden leaves from the apple trees carpeting the ground and the scent of autumn in the air. Rosalie wore her mother's lace and new silk, her hair adorned with small white flowers. Isaac, in a new suit ordered from Cheyenne, waited for her at the altar in the small church, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Phillips began, his voice ringing through the packed church. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Isaac's voice was clear and strong. "I, Isaac, take thee, Rosalie, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part, according to God's holy ordinance. And thereto I plight thee my troth." Rosalie's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the words, overwhelmed by the moment and the man standing before her, looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Phillips concluded, "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Isaac stepped forward, his hands gentle as he framed her face. For just a moment he paused, his eyes meeting hers with a look of such tenderness that Rosalie felt tears spring to her eyes. Then he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that sealed their vows and promised a lifetime of love. The celebration afterward was joyous, with tables set up in the Moretti orchard under the apple trees. Sophia had outdone herself with the feast, and Marco had opened bottles of his homemade apple wine. There was dancing and laughter, and if anyone thought to comment on how the bride and groom matched in height, they kept it to themselves. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the orchard, Isaac found Rosalie sitting alone for a moment, watching the revelry. "Mrs. Keller," he said, offering his hand. "May I have this dance?" She smiled up at him, taking his hand and rising to her feet in one graceful motion. "You may, Mr. Keller." He led her to where other couples were dancing to the music of a fiddle and accordion, pulling her into his arms with easy confidence. As they moved together, perfectly matched in step and height, Rosalie felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. "Happy." Isaac murmured, his lips close to her ear. "Completely," she answered truthfully, "and you, more than I ever thought possible." His arm tightened around her waist. "I love you, Rosalie Keller." "I love you too," she whispered back, savoring the sound of her new name. Later, as they prepared to leave for the running K, now their home together, Rosalie sought out her mother for a final embrace. "Be happy, my Rosie," Sophia said, cupping her daughter's cheek. And remember what I told you, the right man is grateful for the climb. Rosalie glanced over at Isaac, who was shaking hands with her father. He never seemed to mind the height at all, because he sees with his heart, not just his eyes. Sophia smiled knowingly. Those are the best kind of men. With final farewells and well wishes from the guests, Isaac helped Rosalie into the buggy he decorated with ribbons and flowers for the occasion. As they drove away toward their new life together, Rosalie took one last look at the orchard where she'd grown up, at her parents waving from the gate, at the place that had shaped her into the woman she was. "We'll visit often," Isaac promised, reading her thoughts. "And plant apple trees at the running quay if you like." Rosalie smiled, leaning into his side. "I'd like that very much." The first months of marriage brought adjustments for both of them. Rosalie learned to manage a ranch household with Lucia's patient guidance. Isaac discovered that having a wife meant consulting another person before making decisions, a change he embraced more readily than he'd expected. They settled into a rhythm together, finding joy in simple moments, reading by the fire in the evenings, sharing meals at the big oak table in the kitchen, falling asleep and waking in each other's arms. Isaac had built them a new bed, extra long to accommodate their heights, one of many thoughtful gestures that showed how well he understood her needs without her having to voice them. Winter arrived with a vengeance that year, bringing heavy snow and bitter cold. The new barn, though not as large as the old one, provided adequate shelter for the livestock, and the hay donated by neighbors helped stretch their feed supplies on Christmas Eve. A blizzard howled around the house, but inside all was warm and bright. Rosalie had decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and the smell of gingerbread filled the kitchen. She and Isaac sat before the fire, a quilt draped over their laps, watching the flames dance. "I have something for you," Isaac said, reaching beneath the sofa and producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I know we agreed to wait until tomorrow, but I can't wait any longer." Rosalie took the gift, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a small wooden box, beautifully carved with apple blossoms around the edges. "Isaac, it's lovely." "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a delicate gold locket. Rosalie lifted it out, admiring the intricate engraving on its surface. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Open it," Isaac said again, his eyes intent on her face. Rosalie carefully opened the locket to find two miniature portraits inside, one of her parents, one of Isaac. "So you'll always have your family with you," he explained, "no matter where life takes us." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's perfect, thank you." She leaned over to kiss him softly. "I have something for you too, though it's not wrapped." "Oh." His eyebrows rose in curiosity. Rosalie took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. "I wasn't sure at first, but I visited Dr. Simmons in town yesterday and he confirmed it." She took Isaac's hand, guiding it to rest against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Isaac, in summer." For a moment he sat perfectly still, his expression frozen in shock. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled her, he gathered her into his arms, lifting her clean off the sofa and spinning her around. "Isaac," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders, "put me down before you hurt yourself." He set her gently back on her feet but kept his arms around her, his face alight with happiness. "A baby, our baby." "Yes," she confirmed, smiling through her tears. "Our baby." He dropped to his knees then, pressing his face against her middle. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I'm your papa and I love you already." Rosalie stroked his hair, her heart so full it felt it might burst. This was more than she had ever dared to hope for, a husband who loved her completely, a home filled with warmth, and now a child on the way, a family of her own. "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Isaac rose to his feet, pulling her close again. "Rosalie, you've given me everything I never knew I needed. A family, a future." He kissed her, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gesture. "Yes, I'm happy. Happier than I have any right to be." As they stood together before the fire, the blizzard raging outside but powerless to touch the warmth within, Rosalie thought of all the twists and turns that had led them here, the mockery she'd endured, the quiet dignity with which Isaac had defended her, the simple kiss on her forehead that had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his thumb tracing lazy circles on the small of her back. "About the day in the mercantile when you kissed my forehead." She smiled up at him. "Did you know then that this is where we'd end up?" "I hoped," he admitted. "I'd been watching you for months, trying to work up the courage to approach you, when I heard those women laughing." His jaw tightened momentarily at the memory. "I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to do something. So you kissed my forehead. It seemed right in the moment. I wanted to show you that your height was nothing to be ashamed of, that someone could look up to you and still find you beautiful." His eyes held hers. "I just didn't plan on falling head over heels in love with you quite so quickly." Rosalie laid her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm glad you did, both the kiss and the falling in love part." "So am I, Mrs. Keller." He pressed his lips to the top of her head. "So am I." The baby arrived in late July, a daughter they named Sophia Isabella Keller, after both their mothers. She was long-limbed and strong, with Isaac's blue eyes and Rosalie's dark hair, a perfect blend of them both. "She'll be tall," Dr. Simmons predicted as he examined the newborn. "Takes after her parents." Rosalie, exhausted but radiant, exchanged a smile with Isaac. "Good," she said firmly. "She'll reach all the high places in life." Isaac took to fatherhood with natural ease, often carrying little Sophia around the ranch in a sling across his chest while he worked, showing her the horses and cattle, telling her stories about how someday part of this land would be hers. "You're spoiling her," Rosalie teased one evening as she watched him rock their daughter to sleep, singing softly. "Probably," he agreed without remorse. "But look at her, Rosalie. How could I not? Life settled into a new pattern, one dictated by a baby's needs but no less sweet for it." Sophia grew quickly, as the doctor had predicted, and by her first birthday was already taller than other children her age. "She's got your spirit, too," Isaac commented as they watched her determinedly pull herself up on furniture, falling and getting back up again without complaint. "Stubborn. Resilient. Heaven help us when she's older," Rosalie laughed. The running K prospered under their joint stewardship. The military contract Isaac had secured before their wedding provided steady income, and his careful management of the herd ensured they weathered even poor seasons successfully. Rosalie's suggestion to plant apple trees on a south-facing slope proved inspired within 3 years. They were harvesting enough fruit to sell alongside the beef, diversifying the ranch's offerings. As Sophia's second birthday approached, Rosalie discovered she was expecting again. This pregnancy was harder than the first. She was often tired and unwell, especially in the early months. "Maybe we should hire more help," Isaac suggested one evening as he massaged her swollen feet. "You're doing too much." "We've already hired the Peterson boy to help with the horses," Rosalie protested. "I meant for the house. Someone to help with Sophia and the cooking, at least until after the baby comes." Rosalie hesitated. The idea of having another woman in her kitchen, caring for her child, didn't sit well with her. "I can manage." Isaac gave her a knowing look. "You don't have to do everything yourself, you know. Accepting help isn't weakness." "Says the man who tried to rebuild an entire barn by himself last spring," she retorted. He had the grace to look sheepish. "Point taken. But I'm serious, Rosalie. Think about it at least. In the end, they compromised. 16-year-old Mary Simmons, the doctor's daughter, would come 3 days a week to help with Sophia and the heavier household tasks. Rosalie found she actually enjoyed having another woman to talk to during the days when Isaac was out on the range, and Mary adored Sophia, who followed her around like a devoted puppy. Their son, Marco Isaac Keller, arrived on a snowy February night in 1882, with Dr. Simmons barely making it through the drifts in time. He was smaller than Sophia had been, but just as determined, announcing his arrival with lusty cries that echoed through the house. "Another fighter," Isaac said proudly as he held his son for the first time. "Like his mama." "And his papa," Rosalie added, watching the tender way Isaac cradled the tiny bundle. Life with 2 small children was chaotic but joyful. Sophia, now a sturdy toddler with her father's confident stride, appointed herself her brother's protector and would sit beside his cradle for hours, keeping watch as she solemnly informed anyone who asked. The spring that Marco turned 1 and Sophia 3, they celebrated another milestone, the 5th anniversary of that day in the Mercantile when Isaac had kissed Rosalie's forehead. "Half a decade since you scandalized the town," Rosalie teased as they picnicked under the apple trees they'd planted together during their first year of marriage, now beginning to bear fruit. The children played nearby, Sophia helping Marco toddle across the grass. "Best scandal I ever caused," Isaac replied, reaching over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that still made her heart flutter after all this time. "Though I think they've forgiven us, considering how many of them showed up for the barn raising last month." It was true. Over the years, as the running K had grown and prospered, as Rosalie and Isaac had proven themselves not just successful ranchers but good neighbors, even those who had once mocked Rosalie's height had come around. Mrs. Peterson now regularly invited Rosalie to her quilting circle. Tucker tipped his hat respectfully whenever they passed in town. "People change," Rosalie mused, "or maybe we change them. A bit of both, perhaps." Isaac watched their children, his expression softening. "You know, I never thanked you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to let me court you, despite everything. For taking a chance on a broken-down old soldier with nightmares and a bad leg." Rosalie laughed softly. "You were hardly broken down, Isaac Keller. And I was never brave, just desperate for someone who didn't see my height first and me second." "I saw you," he said simply. "I always have. I know." She leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "That's why I fell in love with you. That and your impressive forehead kissing technique." His laughter joined hers, bright and clear in the spring air. In the years that followed, their family grew again. Another daughter, Elizabeth Sophia, joined them in 1884, followed by twins James and Joseph in 1886. The running K expanded as well, with Isaac purchasing adjacent land when it became available, until they owned 5,000 acres of prime Wyoming rangeland. They faced challenges: 2 drought years that threatened the herd, a particularly harsh winter that claimed some of their stock, a fire in town that destroyed the Mercantile and had to be rebuilt through community effort. Through it all, they stood together, their partnership only growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. By 1888, a decade after that fateful day in the Mercantile, Silver Creek had grown into a proper town, with a school, a bank, and even a small hotel. Isaac served on the town council, his steady judgment respected by all. Rosalie taught at the Sunday school and helped organize community events, her height now so unremarkable to the townspeople that newcomers who stared or commented were quickly set straight. "You remember how it was when we first met?" Isaac asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, expanded now to accommodate their large family watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. The children were inside, the older ones helping the younger with their lessons under the watchful eye of Mary Simmons, now married to the blacksmith's son, but still a regular presence in their household. How could I forget? Rosalie's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. I was the town curiosity, and you were the taciturn rancher who shocked everyone by kissing my forehead in broad daylight. Isaac smiled at the memory. I was terrified you'd slap me. I considered it, she admitted with a laugh, for about half a second. Then I was too stunned to do anything but stand there like a fool. Not a fool, never that. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Just the woman I was meant to find. Rosalie studied his face in the fading light, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now. Threads of silver in his dark hair, but those blue eyes still as clear and true as the day they'd met. At 42, Isaac Keller was still the most handsome man she'd ever known, and not just because of his physical appearance but because of the goodness that shone through everything he did. You ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Marrying me. Taking on 5 children and all the chaos that comes with them. Isaac's expression turned serious. Rosalie, in all our years together, I have regretted many things, not buying that south pasture before Henderson did, letting Sophia talk me into that wild Mustang that nearly broke my arm, eating 3 pieces of your mother's mincemeat pie at Christmas when one would have sufficed. His eyes crinkled at the corners. But marrying you, having our children, those are the best decisions I ever made, the only ones that really mattered in the end. She leaned over to kiss him, a gesture as natural as breathing after all their years together. I love you, Isaac Keller. And I love you, Rosalie Keller, height and all. From inside the house came the sound of childish laughter, then Sophia's voice calling, Mama, Papa, come see what the twins did. They rose together, hand in hand, to see what new adventure awaited them inside. As they stepped through the doorway built extra tall, as Tucker had once mockingly suggested, though not for the reason he'd implied, but because Isaac had wanted their home to reflect both of their statures, Rosalie felt a familiar surge of gratitude. For a tall girl who had once been laughed at and mocked, who had believed love might never find her, life had unfolded in ways she could never have imagined. All because a cowboy had seen beyond her height to the woman beneath, had said nothing in the face of cruelty, and had simply kissed her forehead. In that quiet gesture had been the beginning of everything, a love story written not in grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but in daily kindnesses, in understanding glances, in a home built to fit them both exactly as they were. And as she watched Isaac scoop up the twins while Sophia explained their latest mischief, Marco looked on with his serious eyes, and little Elizabeth tugged at her skirts for attention. Rosalie knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single inch of her journey.